have to have a diversified territory. We have to maintain biodiversity, and deforestation has resulted out of the extraordinary success of palm oil. People don't understand that since palm oil is so extraordinary, the supply has increased in proportion with demand, and this has had adverse impacts, including deforestation in particular. So on how to manage this topic and how to ensure that the healthy food doesn't result in an unhealthy environment. Now we have NIELS, CEO and founder of SATELLIGENCE, and he has studied the latest findings on two countries that are the leaders in the production of palm oil, Indonesia and Malaysia. So we'll ask him to clarify this aspect relating to the environmental impact of the production of palm oil. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Buongiorno. I am Niels. To help the industry. Am I back on?
We can hear you, but not completely clear. I don't know if you...
yeah, I was off for a while. Am I back on now?
Yes, now it's better.
Ah, good. Yeah. So we work with the industry to help verify and demonstrate sustainable production. And we do that by using data from satellites and the ground. So we work with major growers and traders such as GAR, Wilmar, Bunge, but also with consumer good brands, Mondelez, Unilever, IKEA, and others, as well as investors and asset managers. Professor PRATESI mentioned the misinformation around palm oil production, and I want to have a look at that. We all know that the European Commission has approved a new law for imports of deforestation-free commodities, and the EC asked the European public, okay, what do you think is the most notorious crop that should definitely be monitored? And then 80% of the public said, yeah, palm oil, that should definitely be monitored and part of the European law. But far few people said, yeah, paper or coffee. It is not so much known. So when we're discussing about reputation, this is very interesting, because what is the reality that we see from the science? At first, we see that the actual deforestation around the world, there's other commodities like cattle and soy that are very significant. The big circle means a lot of deforestation, a large number. The small circle for palm actually means, in comparison, the impact is much smaller. And then also, very importantly, we know that the number of companies that make commitments to improve the situation are also much higher than from the cattle and other commodities. So yeah, what can we really say about these commitments in the palm industry if we monitor that using satellites? So at SATELLIGENCE, we have computer software to interpret all the satellite images we get around the world, scanning every 10 meters of the Earth's soil every day, but to combine that with the information on where are the plantations, the farms, where's the palm growing, how is that relating to the mills and the refineries and the factories of each company in the supply chain. So this is what it looks like. We have the satellites, and then the software says, okay, these pixels, they are very dark green. They are the high biodiversity forest, and the light green is forest that has been more impacted by the humans. We can also see which pixels are here in yellow, the palm, where is it growing? Professor Mayat already mentioned the distribution of where everything is grown, we need to know that. So we get that from the satellites, as well as the deforestation. Where is that happening? And then we need to put that in the context of the supply chains of the producers. So the buyers also know where they're buying from. Which you see the black lines here are, for example, is it palm oil, or is it like pulp and paper, or cocoa, or coffee? What is the ownership on it? So when we run the analysis of 22 years of satellite data to see what is the palm oil driven deforestation, we have seen that in 2015, many companies, producers made the commitment saying, we are going to make an effort to stop deforestation. And you can see here, 2015 was in Indonesia, a lot of deforestation. The bar is very high. Why? Because there were huge numbers of fires that caused haze everywhere. Many people will remember the Amazon, huge fires. So, but we can see that after, the bars get much smaller. And in fact, if we run the data for 2022, we see that it is as low almost as in the past 22 years. So that's a marked decrease in the palm-driven deforestation since the industry really made big commitments. And that's very interesting. We see this trend go down. But at the same time, if we look at the prices in the same period, we have seen that they are only going up. And especially until May, even through the roof. But does that also mean that now the deforestation is increasing? Well, our data shows that is not the case. If we look at this year, every month, we can compare what this year's deforestation, how it's looking like the monthly average of the deforestation for the past years, like 2019, 2020, we see that the bars are much lower. Apart from March, there was more deforestation, but in the total and on average, there's a lot less deforestation this year, even with these high prices. Well, how can that be? It is not slowing down because the production demand volume is decreasing. There's also was an economic drop due to Corona, but it's also not the case. And importantly, it's also not because there's hardly any forest left. No, there's actually 20% to 70% in green regions like Papua, where there's still a lot of forest in the concessions. For Malaysia, I don't show it here because of the time, but there's exactly the same trend of decreasing deforestation due to palm. Even with the smallholders, but I can go into that later. So I think the main thing here is that the palm oil industry has a bad reputation in the media, but I think that recognition for the achievements is due because the monitoring and the commitments made and the performance can be an example for all these other oil crops and other commodities that now are the target of this EU regulation. Well, that's a positive story, but of course there's also something left to be desired with the new EU regulation coming up. Deforestation is still continuing, but thanks to the satellite data, we can now pinpoint the hotspots of where this deforestation is happening and which companies are operating there, which suppliers are there, and who is buying from these regions. So that is what you can see in these red areas here, zooming into entire Indonesia. So in these red regions, we see some increase. So if we would go to Papua, for example, we can see that the green line is there's still a lot of forest inside the palm oil concession. Concessions are, say, the areas of production that are not yet that are converted or not yet to palm. In this case, not yet, 72% still in forested situation. But in 2022, we can see here, there's an increase. So we have to watch those areas. And the certainty for the palm oil sector is that we can do that now, and we can show that to the buyers, we can show that to investors, we can show that to the consumers. And because we have these concession boundaries, those are the black lines that you can see here. So we know who owns this plantation. We can see that in the red. Recently, they started clearing the dark green, and the dark green is very intact, high biodiverse forest. So this is a risk to everyone buying from this specific company over here. We can see the same here with the peatlands. Peat is carbon in the soil, which if it is disturbed, it will release a lot of carbon emissions, which is bad for the climate. So my message being that actually the reputation of the sector should be much better. It can be an example for many other sectors, especially with the EU law. And that now, as an industry, we do have the tools. I know that many of our clients are a bit worried about this EU law, about the implications, but I want to reassure that the tools are there, so we can make a good effort, every one of us, to work on the compliance with this EU regulation. And I think that's almost exactly 10 minutes, so I would like to stop here.
Even geduld.
Grazie, Niels. Thank you, Niels. Very interesting. First thing first, because if you introduced the theme of communication that should improve this bad reputation, starting from data. And thank you for explaining that sustainability is very much conditioned by technology. So thinking that you can achieve sustainability by simply reducing activities is a utopia. You can achieve sustainability if you use technology to somehow improve our balance with the environment. And satellites are some of the innovations we need for monitoring. And we know, scientists know, but luckily also politicians know. As a matter of fact, we know that there is a European regulation that imposes or will impose satellite monitoring. And this is to ensure corporate compliance so that they realize that we cannot afford deforestation, considering what has been done over the last few years. And the fact that the situation has improved is also probably due to the fact that the focus of the whole world on palm oil has entailed investments in the right direction. But talking about